All right, so I want to get into why circle prospecting, although a lot of people talk about it as a prospecting method, why that would be maybe the last thing that I would do, because there's so many other things that I think that you can get a lot better results from before I'd ever go to circle prospecting. And I want to make it super clear for the audience that I am not poo-pooing circle prospecting. A lot of people crush it with that strategy, and we'll talk about maybe why that might be in just a minute. But for the vast majority of people, there is a much better prospecting methodology where you would get a better result, and that's what I want to talk about. And so I think that as people are either newer to this business or they're looking for different avenues of prospecting, for sale by owners and expireds is often talked about the most. We're not even going to talk about that. We're going to talk about a way of prospecting that allow you to get great results. And I think my point is a lot of people turn to, okay, well, if it's not going to be for sale by owners and expireds, Brandon, well, then I'm just going to circle prospect, right? So I want to talk about that. I guess let's dive in and first, for the audience sake, talk about circle prospecting conversion ratios. One of the agents that we're coaching right now, and this is what prompted me to make this video, he was talking about the power of what we're going to talk about today, which is called demographic prospecting. And he was looking at that because he was a lifelong circle prospector. I think, and I don't have the post in front of me, but I think, he's been in the business for 11 or 12 years. And he's like, I've been prospecting for that long, and I've been circle prospecting. And on average, getting about a 2% conversion. And what we mean by that is contact to lead. So contact, we'll just define that, Ben, just for the audience sake, is a voice-to-voice or face-to-face conversation with a decision maker. So that's what we mean by contact, because oftentimes we make these videos and people are like, well, what's a contact? So contact to lead, they pick up the phone, they call people, they talk to people. It's about a 2% conversion. So in the world of circle prospecting, it takes about 50 of those contacts, not just 50 pickups, right? 50 conversations with decision makers to generate one lead. So that's a 2% conversion. Again, we're going to talk about a way to do this where you get a lot better results and not have to work so hard, which is the point, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and keep in mind, too, 50 contacts. I mean, yeah, you can do that in a day.
Yeah.
But if you're only getting one lead every 2-3 days, that's probably why.
Yeah.
Right? You're not doing anything wrong. It's a 50-1.
That's right. That's exactly right. So let's define, when we talk about circle prospecting, just again, I want to make sure that we're speaking the same language. Circle prospecting, the idea of that, as most people know, but just so that we're on the same page in this conversation, we might go a couple hours today. I don't know. I'm just kidding. We'll see. Circle prospecting is simply an agent's going to pick an area, draw a radius around that area, and just dial for dollars. You know what I mean? Yep. They're just going to call and dial and dial and dial and dial and dial, and hope that they find someone that wants to sell. Mm-hmm. Right? So that's why they call it circle prospecting. You draw a circle around the radius, you pick up the phone, you load up a dialer, and you go to town. Okay. So anything you want to add to conversion ratios from circle prospecting before we move into this demographic prospecting methodology?
Nope.
Okay. So when we talk about demographic prospecting, the idea of this is to say, okay, if I'm going to do this activity of prospecting, which I know is very, very difficult, most agents avoid it like crazy, as we know. It's probably the biggest struggle we have in the work that we do with agents. If an agent's going to do the work, the argument that I would make is if an agent's going to call, let's just say 100 people, in circle prospecting, it's very random, right? They don't know who they're calling. They don't know what they're going to hear on the other end of that phone. They don't know to which extent any of those people are going to have any motivation to actually do anything. That'd be option A. That'd be a circle prospecting methodology. Yep. What we're talking about is to do some work up front to create a highly targeted demographic that you're going to prospect, and that will alter all of your results. So as an example, if someone's going to circle prospect a neighborhood and they're going to call 100 random people, we talked about the conversion, what that might look like. in this world that we're talking about, maybe you call a list of absentee owners. If you were to call 100 absentee owners, the likelihood is that you're going to have much greater results. Why? Well, because you've targeted the list of people that you're going to communicate with. In this case, we're talking about absentee owners. We'll talk about some more in just a second. These are people that we know are already play into a large percentage of the transactions that happen every single year. I've done a ton of studies on this, actually, of like the transactions in a market and how many are absentee owners. Huge percentage.
Yeah.
So if you were to choose, Benny, you were going to prospect for 2-3 hours. It only makes sense to spend your time, energy, and effort going after a demographic that you know has a higher likelihood of selling versus just spending your time randomly calling people that you have no idea what's going to happen. Would you agree?
100%. There's no emotion in there's no emotion in an absentee owner. Now that's not completely true, but you've got people that are landlords. You've got people that have a vacation home. You've got people that have like Airbnbs, also a vacation home, their own second home. Maybe they inherited it from something happening in life. So a lot of times they're not like, hey, I've got to wait till school ends. Now there might be some conditions and we can get into those, but a lot of times it's purely based on the numbers. And that's why I've had so much success and love this absentee target. But yeah, it goes on and on. So when we talk about that, there's a lot of different categories within it.
Yeah. And the whole point is around demographic prospecting is to create a targeted list of prospects.
That's right.
Before you do the work.
Yep.
And I don't know how anybody would argue against that, where they wouldn't want to say, okay, if I have, again, a list of 100 people that I know the likelihood of them wanting to move is very high versus calling 100 people where I have no idea, why you would choose the latter. I don't know the argument. So let's go deeper on this demographic thing for a second. So one of the demographics that we often talk to agents that we coach about, which is this downsizer. If you really look at and you do any type of research, which I hope agents are doing in their market, and they start to say, okay, if I have 10,000 transactions in a given time, where are those 10,000 transactions coming from? And they do a study. We talked about a large portion are going to be absentee owners. Another huge large portion, and a lot of economists are coming out saying this demographic is going to grow, is downsizers. These people that have homes that are free and clear. They raise their families, right? So they raise their kids. Their kids now they're empty nesters. They're off to college. They're 65 years or older, so they're of retirement age. The home is larger than the typical average home, right? Oftentimes that master bedroom being on the second level, not the first level, and them being in the home for 20 years or longer. We know, oh my gosh, we know that group of people, the likelihood for those people to want to sell, get on one level, get into a ranch style condo is so high. And so, you do the same thing that you would do with circle prospecting. You go into a target market that you want to serve. We'll talk about the upside of that in just a second. And you start to sort out your list and you say, okay, just like we're talking about, instead of me calling these 10,000 random homeowners, maybe I call these 3,500 that meet this list, right? And we see vast, dramatic changes in conversion. So much so, instead of it being 50 to 1, like circle prospecting, we see a 10 to 1. Wow. Meaning, when agents do demographic prospecting, it takes them 10 conversations to generate a high quality lead, which we'll define that in just a minute. And so again, we've all heard this, work smarter, not harder. This is the best example of that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
100%. So I can hear people now saying, okay, we've got demographic 10 to 1. Okay, well, what we'll get into the conversation structure, the price points, but this is what I'm going to say. People are going to say, well, yeah, but they're still not going to want to go out and buy something. And I think this is a piece that people might miss is they have so much equity. They're downsizing. These people, a lot of times they will sell and go buy cash. So the interest rate, all of those things aren't a factor because one, they're not rate locked because what they were so committed to their loan at the point when rates were down, rates were up, they had so much equity, they just kept paying it down because they wanted to pay it off, and it was paid off.
That's right.
Now they have so much equity, they're just going to go and they might just be a cash buyer for you. They sell, they roll it all into their next place. They're downsizing. So it's probably, maybe it's the same price, maybe it's not. But that's the piece I think people often miss. Well, I'm not going to call them. They're not going to move. But yeah, they will.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we already know from based on the studies. I mean, the largest, if you source all the transactions in any given market, this is probably one of the largest demographics. It's probably the largest percentage of closings. And again, looking ahead, when you talk about this transfer of wealth, the largest transfer of wealth that's going to happen in this country here soon, it's coming from this demographic, these baby boomers that are getting ready to retire, right?
100%.
That's where it's coming from. And so being, to your point, being that the properties are free and clear, the interest rate argument is irrelevant.
Exactly.
It's irrelevant because the whole goal of calling this demographic is because they have no mortgage. And so we used to call this, people didn't like this very much, but it used to be called old people in large houses. That's what we used to call it, back like 15, 20 years ago, because these people oftentimes had these huge homes. They were worth a ton of money. They had no mortgage. So it was all equity, right? So there was never any battle around this, that, or the other thing. No battle on commissions, no battle with other agents. They would sell this property that they lived in for 20, 30, 40 years. They raised all their kids. They retired from the job that they were at for 30 years. Now they had this huge nest egg. That's what it's called, is this nest egg, right? Yeah. They would sell the nest egg, and then they would use a small portion of that to buy their home that was downsized. Maybe it was a $500,000 or $700,000 home. They get all that capital. They go buy, and oftentimes, at least in my market, these one-story condos, for seniors, they'd buy one of those for $300,000, with cash, right? Pocket the rest, put it in their retirement accounts. And that's what we're talking about. And downsizers is just one example, right? There's many other demographics that you can go after. I think the point is, before we talk about the benefits of demographic prospecting, the point is, again, if you're going to do what is the hardest part about real estate sales, which is to prospect, right? It's everyone's biggest issue. If you're going to do it, it makes sense to have some strategy going to say, okay, well, who am I contacting? You know what I mean?
100%. Yeah. You can be prepared for the conversation, even though they don't know that you're targeting them. You can be prepared for the flow of that conversation and just take it in a great direction.
That's right. So let's talk about the benefits of demographic prospecting. And you get the same benefit with circle prospecting as you do here. And I think a point is too, though, before we get into that, is I think a lot of people that do circle prospecting say, dude, I totally disagree. I crush it with circle prospecting. And the reason for that is they may not know this. And I've had a lot of conversations with agents in these markets. People that succeed through just traditional circle prospecting do so oftentimes, not every single time, but oftentimes because they're in a transient market. They're in a vacation market. They're in a second home market. They're in a condo market, like the Myrtle Beaches or the Orange Beaches, or to your point, Colorado.
Yeah.
A lot of these markets that are very, very, very transient, where most of the property owners are absentee owners. Of course, when you just circle prospect, you draw a circle around this condo complex, and they're all absentee owners, it's going to go really well.
Yeah.
Where all those property owners don't even live in the state in which you're calling, of course you're smashing it with circle prospecting. Yeah. Lucky you. Yeah. I've always told my wife, it's like, if I ever move to sell real estate, I'm going to a transient market. Yeah. This is how you can see an agent go to 100 deals so quickly, because they don't have to call for sale by owners. They don't have to call expired listings. They don't have to do any of that. All they have to do is circle prospect all day. It's because every single one of the contact is an absentee owner.
Yeah.
You lucky dog.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. We talk to those people and you're like, hey, what strategy are you doing? Oh, all I do is circle prospect. So in a lot of the agents we work with, their head goes to, okay, I got to circle prospect. Well, that's not working in my market. It's not working. And that's the reason, is they're not circle prospecting.
Yeah.
They're actually just calling absentee owners.
Yeah. If you're in a market like mine, here in Michigan, not no one's coming to Michigan. You know what I mean? Like it is not a destination state. Everyone's leaving here, going somewhere else.
Yep.
If you were to just circle prospect here, you wouldn't get anything.
Yeah. Because people stay in their homes for 15, 20,
Forever.
30 years.
Forever. And so that's why and I think a lot of people would agree with that. It's like, dude, I've tried circle prospecting. I don't get shit from it.
Yeah.
Well, it's because you probably live in a in a market like mine where it's like primary residence. They're there forever. They often get objections like, no, they're going to bury me in this house. I ain't never moving.
Yeah.
And so there's a better way,
Yeah.
right? So I just wanted to make the point of people that see people or hear agents that are doing really well with traditional circle prospecting. It's not every case, but in most cases, it's very market driven. They're probably in a market that's very transient, and they're calling a lot of a lot of absentee owners, where it's their second home, their vacation home, et cetera. And that's why they're lucky enough to just circle prospect and have those results. Okay. So benefits of this type of prospecting. Well, and I keep talking to agents about this, that if they were to spend more time doing this and building a pipeline with this type of lead, they wouldn't have to be so dependent, Ben, on for sale by owners and expireds. Because if you look at the two, and I want your thoughts on this too, you get to pick where you work. I think, to me, that's the biggest benefit. I don't know about you, but when I first started in real estate and I started prospecting mostly for sale by owners and expireds, because that's all I knew, that's all anybody talked about, you didn't get to decide where you worked. You didn't get to decide where a for sale by owner came up or where an expired listing came up. And I often was spending, Ben, an hour and a half to go to a listing appointment. Like, that was the normal. And I was like, man, this is a lot of driving. I didn't realize it at the time. Be like, I don't get how these agents, I remember vividly hearing interviews of agents that talk about, these local market agents, that they just dominated this local area. I'm like, man, that would be nice to have all my listings in the city in which I lived and where I knew everybody. It makes sense. You have signs everywhere. You start to build this personal brand, et cetera, et cetera. And you don't get that with for sale by owners or expireds. So if you do any type of demographic prospecting, you get to decide where you're doing your prospecting, where you're getting your listings, right? Would you agree with that?
100%. And it also adds to just your knowledge, your familiarity around it. So now when you do have these conversations in these targeted spots, you know every property there. You've been in a lot of them. You've had conversations with a lot of those people, and you can speak really intelligently when you have those conversations with those homeowners. And it will just set you up. It'll give you a lot more confidence as you're maybe even just building this muscle of prospecting.
That's right. So we talked about location. What's another benefit of this type of prospecting?
Yeah, location, price point.
Price point. Yeah. I mean, you get to pick the product. Unlike a for sale by owner or an expired, again, you kind of get what you get. You don't throw a fit. That's what you tell your kids, right? That's what a for sale by owner or expired is. It's like, you don't really have a lot of options there. But you could say, okay, well, I really, really want to move up my price point. I want to get into selling, maybe, instead of selling something that you have no choice in, I really want to focus on the $500,000 price point. Because in my market, and this is just an example, in my market, those homes sell quickly. It's a great revenue per transaction business model, right? And you get to pick the product, to your point, to say, well, maybe you want to be an expert in new construction. Maybe you want to be an expert in condos. You get to really pick the type of product in which you represent.
Yep. What I went after was duplexes.
That's right. Exactly
so I
right.
went after that, and it's like you can just be an expert. You can be really familiar with it. It's a higher price point, and I had a ton of success with that.
Yeah. And then the last one, I mean, there's a lot more benefits, but the last one I've got on my list is no competition. This is probably for agents that are newer to the business or newer to sales, and they're starting to pick up the phone and prospect, hopefully. One of their biggest challenges is competition. If you're going after for sale by owners and expired listings, there has to be a high level of urgency. You have to make it a priority first thing in the morning. You're going to go up against some of the most skilled agents in your market. With this, you might be the only agent this homeowner's heard from in years. There is no competition and there's no urgency. So for all the agents that are in this business and they have it as a lifestyle business, there's no requirement with demographic prospecting to start right at 8 a.m. You can do it whenever you feel like it. You know what I mean? You could do it at 1 in the afternoon. You could do it at 4 in the afternoon. You could do it in the evening. You could do it in late morning. You have to drop off kids. You're a single parent, perhaps. There's no requirement for you to make that first dial like there would be with a for sale by owner and expired. So there's a lot of upside to it. The other thing is, I want to stay here for a second. A lot of agents look at, that don't prospect from the perspective of, I'm not going to make calls, or they don't look at themselves as a salesperson. So they look to geographic farming. And again, I would make the argument that if you're going to do any type of geographic farming, that you take the same principles we're talking about in this conversation and apply it to your marketing campaigns, right? So geographic farming is exactly what it says it is. You're farming a geographic area. So if there's 1,000 homes in your geographic farm, a lot of coaches and trainers are like, all right, we're gonna market to all 1,000 homes. Why? It'd make a lot more sense to do a demographic farming campaign where you're building a highly targeted list of people, such as absentees, such as probates, such as downsizers, free and clears, et cetera, people that are filed for divorce, all these different demographics. I'm going to market to those people. It makes more sense to put my marketing dollars to people that have a higher likelihood to sell versus the Joneses who just moved in that aren't moving for 25 years.
That's right. And then you layer it with those phone calls, with those conversations. It's just, full court press.
That's right. All right, let's define a lead for the audience. We talked about this word. We throw this word around, lead, all the time. And I think it often gets used in the industry quite a bit. How we define a lead. So if I'm coaching you, or I'm coaching a new real estate agent, it's really important to define what a lead is and what a lead isn't. And the reason for that is because oftentimes when agents are newer to prospecting, they'll just start getting into the data collection business.
Right.
It's like anybody with the pulse they talk to that gives them the time of day, they stuff them into their CRM. They stuff them into their pipeline, and they think that that's a lead.
Yeah.
And then when it comes time to call that person, they're like, well, what's the follow-up script, Ben? Yeah. Well, what do I say when I follow up? Yeah. And you don't want to call them. Well, that's because it wasn't a real lead.
That's right. Well, and I think because it's a pipeline type of strategy, right? Yeah. Somebody's really like, I don't know when this is going to convert. And it's not like right now, it's really clear. They don't carry the same intensity when they prospect, circle prospect, or geographic farming. They don't carry that same intensity. So they end up putting people in that, to your point, are not qualified. And that's what we're going to get into. So I just say you got to be as intense with these people so that when you do follow up, there's something to follow up about. And that they're not just saying what you want to hear to get you off the phone. And then they're just in your world, and you're never going to actually talk to them again. And then you got to spend the money on the mail, or you got to spend the money on all this other stuff for no reason.
It's a great point, and I just added that to my notes too, disqualifying. The importance of disqualifying. Okay, so let's talk about defining a lead. So there's 4 points if people are taking notes. Number 1 is the prospect has clear motivation to sell. Clear motivation. What do you mean, Brandon? Clear motivation. Define that for us. Well, we follow a DART framework that we've created for all of our coaching clients. D-A-R-T. D stands for desire. Do they want to sell? I mean, this is the biggest, I don't know why this is so difficult for agents, Ben, but it's like, well, what's the objection handler, Ben, for someone that says they're not moving? It's like, dude, that's a condition. That is not an objection, right? Our job is to not convince people to move. So many agents think that it is, right? Okay, so they have clear desire to move. They want to make a move. They have a want. The A stands for ability. Do they have the ability to move? A lot of people want to move, but they can't move for one reason or the other. The R stands for reasons. I mean, this is the why. Why are they moving, right? A lot of people want to move. They have the ability to move, but they don't have a strong reason to move. If I get this price, I'll move, or if interest rates, that's not a reason, right? Most people, if you talk to all of your clients, this is for the audience. If you talk to all your clients that you actually close and you ask them, why did you move? There's a specific reason. I had a baby. I had a divorce. I had a job transfer, et cetera. There was a specific, tangible reason on why they did what they did, right? It wasn't like, oh, well, interest rates came down a point, so we decided, what the hell, we'll just make a move. No, they're not doing that. It's based on a large life event. Would you agree with that piece?
100%.
Yeah. And then the last one, T, stands for timing. So when we talk about, is somebody motivated to sell? When you are having a prospecting conversation, whether that at the door or over the phone, do they have the desire to sell? Do they want to move? Are they expressing language that says, yes, I want to move? Do they have the ability, and have they given you specific reasons on why they want to do so? And do they have a specific time frame for when they would want to? That's motivation. Number 2, they are not obligated to another real estate agent. In other words, they have verbalized, Ben, that they are open to the idea of interviewing you when the time comes to sell that home. They have verbalized it. In fact, you had a conversation with the prospect about it, and they have told you, yes, when the time comes, you sound like somebody we'd love to meet with. And we'd love the opportunity to meet with you and interview you and go from there. You got to find that out. So many agents are prospecting homeowners who are obligated to another agent. It's like, dude, you got to have that conversation. Number 3, they're all big. They're all important. The prospect invites the agent to have another conversation in the future about when it makes sense to meet. We're not going to get into lead follow-up too much today, although that's a huge topic. Most agents fail with lead follow-up because the lead follow-up is based on, hey, when should I call you back? It's like, when should we talk again to decide when it would make sense to meet? That's the whole premise of the conversation. Because when we talk about the structure of the call, we're talking about the appointment being the premise of the conversation, yeah? And then lastly, number 4, they give you a valid email address. So in this conversation, they've got clear motivation to sell, Ben. They're not obligated to another agent. They invite you to have a conversation to talk about when to meet, and they've given you a valid email address. The 5th one that I'm going to add on here that you just brought up is to disqualify. Talk about that for a minute.
Yeah. I think once, especially with a pipeline type of business, once you get somebody that, checks a lot of these boxes, then it's like, okay, now I got to push this person gently away and see what they give me back.
That's right.
And there's a lot of different sales strategy scripts, word tracks that we can kind of give you on this. But the key is, let me just double check that this person just isn't telling me what I want to hear, because they just want to get me off the phone.
Yep.
And then they're going to, open up their phone and say, I love your saying, put in there, real estate agent, never answer again.
That's right.
And you're never going to get a hold of them again. So this is a key piece. If you check these boxes to just check yourself, go through this, push them away, and really find out if you actually have somebody there or not.
Yeah, just to give an example, like this is the part where you got to have a little bit more, you got to have a little fun on these calls. You can't just be so serious. And so one of the techniques that we often talk about with agents that we coach is to, at the end of that conversation, say something like, Ben, listen, you're not going to hang up the call and regret having this conversation and say to yourself, what have I just done? I just gave this real estate agent my email address. I'm never going to talk to this person again. You're not going to do that, are you? And you've got to be the one to bring that up. So the prospect says, no. I appreciate what you're saying. No, I genuinely enjoyed this conversation. I genuinely want to hear from you again. You have got to give the prospect the opportunity to tell you no. And most agents are hiding because they have happy ears. They don't want to hear the truth, right? They don't want to find out that they don't have a lead because it's like, I just prospected for 2 hours. I want to believe I just got something from it, right? It's another topic. Now, when we define the lead, this is the issue with buying leads. Agents feel as though that they can get out of this activity of prospecting, give a company their credit card, and they think the company is giving them what we just defined as a lead. They think when they pay Company X is providing them with leads, with people that have motivation to sell, that don't have a real estate agent, all of those things we just talked about. That is simply not the case. And again, this is not a conversation about internet leads, but the problem with that is that's what agents think they're buying, and they're not. They're just buying data. They're just buying a name and a number of someone, and we just believe that it makes way more sense from an efficiency standpoint, from being in control of your business, to be able to scale it, profitability, et cetera, to just call the homeowner. Why pay the other company $150 to give you Bob Jones's cell phone number when you could just call Bob Jones directly for free?
Yep.
Why? So anyway, that's don't get me started on that.
So think about this.
Yeah, please.
The first call is building the list.
That's right.
The second call is your secret expired list.
That's such a great point.
So that follow-up call, if you have the right person, you disqualified them. When you call them back, whenever it is that they told you, invited you back, now that is the time where it's an expired lead, quote unquote. And we're going to go after and set that appointment.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, we talk about it all the time. Prospecting, you could look at as a marketing activity. Prospecting is a process of, okay, I'm going to go have these conversations with people in my market, most of which will not be a lead, most of which will not go into my pipeline. So I do this activity, and we'll talk about some numbers in just a second, and I have conversations that turn into leads. So the first call is to generate the lead. We call it lead generation, lead follow-up for a reason. So the first call is lead generation for the most part. For the most part, right? And if you're calling for sale buyers and expireds, certainly there's a large percentage of those that can turn into appointments on the first call.
Yeah.
But if you're going to circle prospect or do some demographic prospecting, a pipeline building activity, most of the time it's first call to generate the lead. The second, third, fourth call, et cetera, are all lead follow-up that turn into appointments, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So let's talk about this a little bit more as far as generating the pipeline. I want to outline what the conversation could be so that people listening or watching this podcast episode can get an idea, okay, how do I frame this conversation? So we believe when I coach or I train a real estate agent who is new to sales, there's 5 parts to a prospecting conversation. Part 1 is the pattern interrupt. It's vitally important that when you contact somebody, understanding that you are absolutely interrupting their day, right? There is just no way around it. You know what I mean? You've got to get over that. So the pattern interrupt is designed so that the person, and oftentimes on the receiving end, you know it's a sales call and you regret it. You regret picking it up immediately. That's the pattern that we're talking about interrupting. So we have to get to that quickly. Then number 2 is we have to actually get their permission to have the conversation. So again, I can get into so many different things, and I won't. This is the problem with most scripts is they force their way into the conversation. What we teach is a permission-based opener, such that the prospect is the one welcoming the conversation, Ben, which is a much better way to have a conversation. Anybody who has ever cold called, prospected, made sales calls over the phone, they would tell you, oh my gosh, the rejection is insane. I don't want to deal. Well, then get rid of it. Get the person's permission to have the conversation. You don't have to deal with that ever again. That's another podcast. That's number 2. Number 3 is to then uncover the person's motivation. It's what we talked about, the DART framework. Number 4 is to ask for the appointment. Well, what if this person's 6 months out? You still want to ask for the appointment. Number 1, motivated sellers invite agents to come to their home. So you might find just because somebody says something that is not always the case, right? Just because someone says, well, we're thinking about moving in the next 6, 7 months, and then you have a great conversation with somebody, you ask for the appointment the way that we teach agents to do it, and they say yes. But most of the time they're going to say no, which is the point. Because the next step, part 5, is to confirm next steps, which is when are we having the conversation about meeting? Because they've said no to the appointment now, Ben, we know this is a pipeline conversation. We know that the vast majority of these conversations don't turn into an appointment on the first call. We have to talk about the appointment so that the next conversation is about, well, if it doesn't make sense to get together now, obviously you guys are a year out. When would it make sense for have that conversation? When could you see us getting together and talking about potentially working together? Get the prospect to tell you. That's kind of the framework of the conversation. Is there anything I missed or that you want to add?
No, just the fact that the reason we do it this way and the reason people have told us and the feedback we get is, man, I enjoy this way more. It feels way more natural. It's because it is.
Yeah.
To like interrupt somebody and then gain permission.
That's right.
To take them through this, to push them away at the end, it is natural. Like that is how you would talk to somebody if you bumped into them on the street, whether you knew them or not.
That's right. That's exactly right. So staying on this topic of, okay, building a pipeline, I think people will get a lot of value out of this. So let's actually break down the numbers. So if someone's taking notes, obviously they can pause this as well. Here's kind of what this would look like. We talked about this type of prospecting having a 10% conversion from contact to lead generated. We talked about what a contact is. We talked about what a lead is. Here's what the business model could look like. All right. This is like the easiest way to $100,000 a year in real estate. This is my belief. Okay. The easiest way. All these agents want to make six figures. Here it is. You have 20 contacts per day. That's 4,800 contacts for the year. Okay. This is for a full-time agent that works 240 days a year. Of those 4,800 contacts, Ben, it's a 10% conversion, which means 480 of those conversations turn into a lead that you put into your database, you put into your CRM that you follow up with over time. We know that 20% of those will turn into a listing appointment set, which is 96. Of those appointments that you set, we know that on average, 50% of those appointments set come to fruition. So in this case, 48 or half of those turn into a listing appointment met, where you actually go to the listing appointment. We know that there's on average, I know there's agents out there that convert higher, but on average, there's a 50% listing appointment met to listing taken ratio. So in this case, this agent would take 24 listings. We know that on average, agents are selling 70% of the listings that they take, which is 17. Average commission about $7,500. It's a $125,000 business model off of one methodology. One client acquisition channel to master, one singular focus. You're not chasing shiny objects. Your focus, this will take you about between 2 and 3 hours per day. 2 to 3 hours per day, Ben, of actual work, an agent gets to six figures. It's not easy, but it is very simple, right? And so I guess let me ask you, why do you feel like agents have such a hard time with this? Like executing on it and actually doing it?
Yeah, this lead source or prospecting?
Just prospecting in general. I mean, we laid it all out. We kind of went through the whole thing. We're going to talk about where to get the data and how to find homeowner contact information in just a second. But like, an agent will listen to this podcast. We've been talking for, I don't know, half hour or something. And we'll lay out the entire thing because most agents think, well, it's an information issue. I just don't know how. We just told everybody exactly how to do it, right? It's like the same argument of, everybody knows how to lose weight, but everyone's fat. You know what I mean? Yeah. So what's the disconnect in our industry, do you think?
Yeah. It's hard.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the disconnect. It's hard. It takes time. And they would rather, maybe not, maybe whatever, but a lot of people would rather pay to shortcut that through a lead, paying for leads or whatever. And oftentimes they get through that and they're disappointed still, right? So I think the reason is it's hard. There's a small percentage of success. There's a lot of rejection. So that gets into maybe some character traits, some self-belief, a lot of that. And what I hear the most is confidence. You know, I don't have the confidence. I don't, even if I get the appointment, I'm not sure what to do on the appointment. I get there and I fall down, I struggle, right? And there's some things we can talk about to get around that, but the learning is in the doing. Yeah. And I think that is what people have the most struggle wrapping their heads around.
It's so true. It's the doing. That's why there's no secrets. That's why it's like, Brandon, you share so much stuff on your, but no one's going to do it. You know what I mean? Yeah. No one's going to actually apply it. You know what I mean? There's a small percentage, right? Those are the people that we tend to work with. Those are the agents that tend to reach out to us for coaching, are the action takers, the ones that actually put this stuff into place. Okay. The other big question we get is, okay, where do I get this data? How are you guys finding this contact information? So we work with a company called Vulcan 7. We'll put a link in the description of this video. And they have the entire platform to create the list that we talked about in today's episode, where you can go into to an area and you can select downsizers, you can get free and clears, et cetera, absentee owners, et cetera, have it all in one place, one platform in any area in your market. And so that's who we recommend. It's really, really simple. Again, I'll put a link in the description. And so for any other agent that maybe is listening to this podcast or watching it on YouTube that wants to have a conversation about coaching, I'll also put a link in the description where someone can reach out, Ben. I know you have a lot of those conversations. You guys can click the link in the description. We can have that conversation about potentially coaching together. Yeah.